During this period, Netanyahu tried to turn the public opinion of the world against Saddam Hussein because Saddam was a serious opponent of Israel. He said that, "I promise you that if Saddam is removed, the world will be a much better place to live." He also mentioned Iran in this meeting and said that it is not necessary to think about intelligence and security in order to change the government in Iran. Netanyahu said, "Iran has 250,000 satellite dishes, internet users. If you want a regime change in Iran, you don't need to go to sea." In 2003 and after the legislative elections, Sharon, the Prime Minister of Israel, decided to introduce Netanyahu as the Minister of Finance, and Netanyahu stipulated that he would have full authority in this ministry. Sharon also agreed to this condition. During this period, with the reforms he made, Netanyahu regained his lost popularity and once again thought about the next prime ministerial election. In December 2005, Netanyahu became the head of the Likud party once again. He was preparing himself for the position of Prime Minister of Israel for the second time. During this period, he made a big turn in his opinions towards Palestine and Hamas. During his first term as Prime Minister, Netanyahu was more inclined to compromise with Palestine, but after he became the party leader, he showed strong reactions to the Palestinians' freedom of action. He was against the 2008 ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Netanyahu said in this regard, "This is not just a ceasefire, this is an agreement to rearm the epic." What do we get? On February 20, 2009, Netanyahu was introduced to the parliament by Shimon Peres. After the vote, Netanyahu became the Prime Minister of Israel for the second time. In 2009, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said that the solution to the Israel-Palestine problem is to create an independent state between these two countries. Netanyahu immediately rejected this issue and said that he will accept this issue only if the Palestinians recognize the Jewish state of Israel. In June 2009, Obama said in Cairo, "The United States does not accept the legitimacy of Israel's continued settlement construction. That is, the United States does not agree with Israeli settlement construction." After Obama's speech, Netanyahu immediately convened a meeting, and on June 14, 10 days after Obama's speech, the government confirmed the Palestinian civilian. On September 24, 2009, Netanyahu said in a speech at the United Nations that Iran is a threat to world peace. In the same meeting, Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran, said that the Holocaust did not exist, and that it was created by Israelis. In response, Netanyahu said that his family members were killed by the Holocaust. In September 2010, Netanyahu agreed to enter into direct talks with the Palestinians, mediated by the Obama administration, for the first time in a long time. On September 27, the 10-month halt on settlement construction ended and the Israeli government approved new construction in the West Bank. Former U.S. Secretary of Defense Robert Gates said in 2011, when he was about to retire, that Netanyahu does not appreciate the U.S. government and endangers Israel. But the Likud party defended Netanyahu and said that most Israelis support the prime minister. In 2011, a large-scale demonstration against the Greeks began in Israel. Hundreds of thousands of people in different cities of Israel protested the increase in prices. Netanyahu formed a committee to investigate and solve the problem. Netanyahu had promised that the problems would be solved quickly with the opinions of this committee, but this did not happen due to the opposition of the parties and the parliament. A year later, Netanyahu said at the United Nations International Forum, "To understand what the world will be like if Iran is armed with nuclear energy, you only have to imagine that Al-Qaeda is equipped with nuclear energy." Then he continued, "Listen to the words of Ayatollah Rafsanjani. They said that using an atomic bomb against Israel would destroy everything in Israel." Rafsanjani said that thinking about this is not unreasonable. This article was said by one of the Iranian moderates. When one hears this, one is shocked. Then he set a red line for Iran's nuclear program. Netanyahu showed a picture of a hypothetical bomb and said that making an atomic bomb has 3 stages. The first stage is 70% of the way to create enriched uranium with a small percentage, in sufficient quantity, that Iran has finished this stage. The second stage, if completed, is 90% of the way to create enriched uranium with a high percentage, in sufficient quantity. Then he drew a red line in the 90% part with a red marker and said, "This is my red line." In 2012, Netanyahu planned to hold early elections, but later decided to merge the two parties and run in full force. In May 2012, Netanyahu wrote a letter to Mahmoud Abbas for the first time. He said that he recognizes the right of the Palestinians to have their own country, but as before, he emphasizes that this country should be demilitarized. On October 25, 2012, Netanyahu and Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman announced that their political parties, Likud and Israel Beitenu, would merge and run together in the Israeli general election on January 22, 2013. In 2013, Netanyahu became the Prime Minister of Israel for the third time. During this period, he made many reforms in the economic field. This made Israel progress in terms of economic indicators and become one of the most profitable countries in the world. In April 2014, Netanyahu said that he was very worried about the alliance between Hamas and Fatah and that it was a great danger for global security. He strongly criticized America and European countries for cooperating with the Palestinian coalition government. In 2014, there was a big war between Hamas and Israel. To know the details of this war, you can watch the video of the history of Hamas and its wars with Israel on YouTube channel. Sometime later, America again criticized Israel's settlement construction. Netanyahu said that criticizing settlements is not worthy of American production. White House spokesman Josh Earnest also said that America's honor has made Israel receive a fixed budget. America's honor has made Israel able to have the latest military technologies. America's honor has made Israel have iron. Netanyahu retracted his words and said that he meant that he does not accept the restrictions on the place of residence of the Jews and that the Jews of Jerusalem should be able to buy houses wherever they want. Wherever +8 they want to buy a house. He said he was confused by the condemnation of the settlements. After this incident, the media reported that the relationship between Netanyahu and the White House has reached its lowest level and the American government is angry about Israel's settlement. In January 2015, Netanyahu was invited to address the U.S. Congress. This speech was Netanyahu's third speech in the joint session of Congress. A day before the speech, Time reported that he had tried to meet with U.S. lawmakers and persuade them to impose more sanctions on Iran. He told his team to do everything they can to derail Iran's nuclear talks and the 5+1. Yossi Alam, a retired brigadier general and former director of Israel's Atomic Energy Commission, said Netanyahu is using the threat of Iran's nuclear weapons as a means to achieve his goals. Little by little, Israel was getting closer to the 2015 elections. In a news conference, Netanyahu said to a journalist who asked if a Palestinian state would be created during his presidency, "Supporting a Palestinian state does not mean that we will hand over our land to Islamic terrorists. But I don't want a one-state solution. I want a peaceful and stable two-state solution. I did not change my policy." What Netanyahu meant was to agree to the establishment of a Palestinian state, but without military force. In 2015, Netanyahu came to power for the fourth time. The differences between the Obama administration and Israel continued. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry criticized the settlements in Israel at the United Nations. In response, Netanyahu strongly criticized the United Nations and the United States. On October 12, 2017, the Netanyahu government announced that it was leaving UNESCO due to its anti-Israel actions, making the decision official in December. In late December 2017, the Israeli government backtracked on its previous action and said it had cancelled its withdrawal from UNESCO. On February 13, 2018, Israeli police said Netanyahu was charged with corruption. According to the police statement, there is enough evidence for this claim. Netanyahu said that these accusations are baseless. Netanyahu was formally indicted on November 21, 2019. If Netanyahu were found guilty, he could be sentenced to 10 years for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. He is the first prime minister in the history of Israel to be accused of a crime. Netanyahu's trial was scheduled to begin on May 24, 2020, originally scheduled for March of that year, but was postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic. As of April 2023, the trial is still ongoing. The 2020 U.S. military airstrike on Baghdad International Airport, which killed the high-ranking Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, brought strong reactions from all over the world. Netanyahu said that Trump acted quickly and decisively. On May 17, 2020, Netanyahu became the Prime Minister of Israel for the 5th time. At the same time as Corona and Netanyahu's trial, massive demonstrations against Netanyahu took place in front of his residence. Netanyahu ordered to disperse the demonstrations under the pretext of the spread of Corona. But the result was exactly the opposite. The protests spread to more than 1,000 centers. After these events, Netanyahu's popularity decreased. Israeli politicians agreed to form a rotating government that would remove Netanyahu from his position as prime minister. Netanyahu was ousted as prime minister, ending his 12-year term. After the 2022 elections, Netanyahu was re-elected as the prime minister of Israel as the leader of a radical coalition. He officially started his 6th term on December 29, 2022. In the first months, Netanyahu wanted to carry out extensive reforms in the judiciary. This work was severely criticized by some politicians, and again people came to the streets. After weeks of public demonstrations in the streets of Israel, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant spoke against the reforms on March 25, saying that the reforms must be stopped because Israel's security is at risk. He was fired by Netanyahu a day later. This caused widespread protests throughout Israel. Finally, Netanyahu agreed to postpone the reforms. In the same year, Israel accelerated the granting of settlement permits. During the war between Ukraine and Russia, Israel did not provide arms to Ukraine. Netanyahu said that Israel was worried that the weapons would fall into the hands of Iran and that they would obtain their technology through reverse engineering. 2023 was the place where Israel and Hamas started a big war. You can watch the comprehensive analysis video of the war between Hamas and Israel in 2023 on YouTube channel. The war increased dissatisfaction with Netanyahu and the government, and there were more calls for Netanyahu's resignation. A poll found that 56% of Israelis believe Netanyahu should resign after the conflict, and 86% of respondents hold Netanyahu responsible for the security lapses that led to the surprise attack by Hamas. On October 29, Netanyahu blamed security agencies for the attack on Twitter. On November 11, 2023, he rejected the ceasefire and said that Israel would stand up to the world if necessary. He said that Israel's defense forces will remain in Gaza as long as necessary, and Israel will prevent the return of the Palestinian Authority to Gaza. Netanyahu described the Palestinian civilian casualties as collateral damage. Netanyahu has a heart disease since 2002, and in 2023, a pacemaker was implanted in his heart. Do you think the world will be a better place without Netanyahu?